The sky above the shattered moon burned with streaks of red and violet, painting the horizon like a wound. Princess stumbled through jagged rocks, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her wings, once strong and radiant, were broken, hanging limply from her shoulders. Each step sent sharp pain through her limbs. She had never felt so weak, so alone. Her people had been betrayed, her guardians turned against her, and now the very world she had been born to protect seemed to reject her. The wind whispered across the barren rocks, carrying faint echoes of her past laughter, a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Pressed herself against the jagged wall of a crater, the cold dust scratching her skin. Tears mingled with the grime of her journey, burning her eyes. Her heart ached with more than physical pain. It was the ache of betrayal, the weight of loneliness pressing down heavier than any armor. She remembered the golden halls of her palace, the warmth of her family's presence, and how quickly it had all been stolen. One day she had been a princess, proud and untouchable. The next, hunted, wounded, and forgotten. Her people were gone, her allies were gone, and even her name now seemed meaningless. The stars above blinked coldly, uncaring, as though mocking her despair. She curled into herself, shivering, feeling the sharp sting of hopelessness. The thought of death did not terrify her. It was the thought of dying unnoticed, unloved, and unremembered that haunted her. She had faced enemies before, but nothing had prepared her for this emptiness, this crushing solitude. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound could be the approach of those who had once sworn loyalty. Trust had become a foreign language, and her own instincts wavered like fragile glass under pressure. Pain and hunger gnawed at her, and yet she forced herself to move. Even crippled, even wounded, she could not give up. She had been raised to survive, to fight, to endure. But endurance was no longer enough when she had no one beside her. Night deepened and the temperature dropped. Wings twitched involuntarily, the broken bones screaming with each tiny movement. She longed to fly, to escape the danger chasing her, but she was grounded, fragile in ways she had never known. Her mind replayed the betrayal again and again. Allies who had promised their swords, their loyalty, their lives, who now hunted her like a common beast. She clenched her fists in frustration and pain. How could they betray her? How could they destroy everything she loved? Her eyes fell on a small, cracked rock, glinting in the pale starlight. She imagined it as a memory, a fragment of her past life, a life filled with laughter, music, and hope. For a moment she let herself breathe in that memory, let herself remember what it was like to feel safe, to belong. But the memory was fleeting, slipping away as quickly as it had come. Reality pressed back in, the harsh, biting reality that she had no one left. Not one friend, not one protector, not even a stranger who might care. Alone, she whispered her regret into the cold air. "I have failed, I am nothing now." Her voice broke, swallowed by the emptiness around her. Hours passed, though she did not know how many. The moon shifted in the sky, shadows creeping across her body. Her body shook from exhaustion and fear, and for the first time she considered surrender. But deep inside, a stubborn spark refused to die. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was stubborn hope. Perhaps it was simply the will to see another sunrise. With trembling arms, she forced herself to crawl further into the craters, searching for even the tiniest shelter. She did not know what she would find, friend, enemy, or nothing at all. But the simple act of moving forward was an act of defiance. Even broken, even betrayed, she would not disappear quietly. Lifted her head and gazed at the stars again. They were distant, cold, and beautiful, and somehow she drew strength from them. Somewhere out there, someone might still care. Somewhere out there, hope could exist. And even if no one came, she would keep moving, keep surviving, keep fighting, for herself, for her people. For the name she refused to let die had been crawling through the crater for hours, dragging her broken wings across the jagged rocks when she felt it, a vibration in the dust beneath her. She froze, every instinct screaming danger. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest, and her wings twitched involuntarily. Someone or something was moving toward her. She pressed her body against the cold ground, wishing she could disappear, wishing the shadows would swallow her. The movement grew closer, squinted into the dim starlight. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and unarmed, carrying no weapon that could harm her. Unlike the hunters who had chased her, this one did not roar or shout. He walked cautiously as if aware of the fragile life before him. His skin was pale and soft, unlike the tough hides of alien warriors she had known. His eyes, large, round, and filled with something unfamiliar, held neither malice nor fear. Instinctively flared her remaining wings, a warning. "Stay back," she hissed, her voice hoarse from pain. The stranger froze in place, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. He spoke in a language she did not understand, his tone calm and gentle. The sound was strange, yet it carried a rhythm that soothed her frayed nerves. Something about the way he moved, careful and deliberate, made her curiosity edge out fear. For a long moment neither moved. Wings twitched, her claws flexed, ready to strike if necessary. But the stranger simply knelt a short distance away and held out a small container of water. "You're hurt," he said again in the same soft tones. The words were not threatening. They did not demand anything from her. They were simple human words. She wanted to reject him, to flee, to trust no one. But thirst and exhaustion made her hesitate. Her pride warred with her survival instincts. If she accepted his help, she might be giving her enemies a way to find her. But if she refused, she might not last the night. She looked at him carefully, noticing the faint scars on his hands and the dirt smudged on his clothes. He was no warrior, yet he had survived this hostile world. Somehow, that gave her hope. Slowly, cautiously, she lowered herself toward the offered water, her claws still poised in defense. The stranger waited patiently, never pressing, never moving closer. When touched the container, he did not flinch or push her away. He only nodded slightly, as if encouraging her to drink. The water was cool and refreshing, and for a brief moment she closed her eyes and let herself feel relief. It was the first comfort she had known in days. Her body ached, her wings throbbed, but a strange warmth spread through her chest, something she had not felt since before the betrayal. After drinking, studied him more closely. His voice was soft, his gestures careful, his eyes honest. He did not seem to belong to her world, yet he did not fear her. He offered no weapons, no clever tricks, no hidden agendas, only a willingness to help. And somehow that simple act, human, unassuming, brave, stirred a flicker of trust in her wounded heart. She spoke then, her voice trembling. "Why help me?" Her words were hesitant, unsure. The stranger tilted his head and smiled faintly, gesturing with one hand to indicate he did not have a clear answer. Yet his presence said more than words ever could. "I see you. I care. You are not alone." Felt tears sting her eyes, and she quickly looked away. She had survived betrayal, she had survived hunters, but she had never expected someone to simply care. It was confusing, frightening, yet strangely comforting. For the first time in days, she imagined a possibility that she might not have to face the darkness alone. The human stayed, silent but patient, watching her with unwavering attention. Still wary, allowed herself to curl slightly, feeling a spark of something long forgotten. She did not know if she could trust him yet, but for the first time the crushing weight of loneliness lifted just a little. Somewhere in the cold shadows of the crater, hope began to breathe again, fragile and unsteady, but alive. Looked at him and whispered almost to herself, maybe I am not entirely alone." Days passed on the shattered moon and found herself moving slower, weaker, yet somehow lighter. The human stayed nearby, never intrusive but always present. He helped her gather small amounts of food, strange fruits that grew in rocky crevices, and guided her to safe places to rest. Every night under the cold, distant stars, watched him sleep, marveling at how a being so fragile, so seemingly ordinary could survive here. His resilience was quiet, understated, but undeniable. At first she barely spoke. Words felt dangerous, like admitting her weakness might make it real, but had a way of listening that made silence feel safe. He never pressed, never demanded. Sometimes he would hum softly in his strange human language, and the sound filled the empty spaces around her like a gentle warmth. Found herself leaning on him more than she expected, not out of dependence but curiosity, fascination, and the faint stirrings of trust. One evening, as the twin moons of her planet rose low over the horizon, finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, carrying the weight of exhaustion and sorrow. They betrayed me," she whispered. "My own people, my allies, they hunted me." Her words caught in her throat, memories flooding back. The fire that swallowed her palace, the screams of those she had loved, the knives turned in her back. Did not flinch. He simply nodded, his eyes soft but unwavering. "You are not alone now," he said gently. Simple words, yet heavier than any sword. They carried meaning that could feel in her bones. She looked at him, searching his face for deceit, but found none. Just honesty and something else she had not expected, courage. Courage not born of strength or weapons, but of persistence, of heart. As the days turned into a week, their bond grew. Began to share fragments of her life, stories of her palace, of the vast garden she once tended, of her people's traditions, of her childhood dreams. Listened with patience and fascination, occasionally telling her about his own world. His stories were simpler yet beautiful, about a small planet filled with oceans and trees, about humans who laughed, cried, and held each other close despite the chaos around them. Found herself laughing softly at his descriptions, a sound that had not escaped her lips in weeks. One afternoon, while climbing a steep ridge, stumbled, pain shooting through her broken wings. Reached for her instantly, catching her before she fell. His hands were gentle, careful, but steady. "I've got you," he said simply. The words warmed her in a way she could not explain. Her pride urged her to push him away, to insist she could manage alone. But she let herself lean on him, even for a moment, and realized how light her heart felt with someone beside her. It was not just physical support, it was emotional. Believed in her when she could not believe in herself. His quiet encouragement, his unwavering presence, gave her hope in a way no palace guard or counselor ever could. Slowly, began to imagine a life beyond fear, betrayal, and solitude. Maybe she could survive, maybe she could fight back, maybe she could even trust again. One night under the starlight, finally allowed herself to speak her gratitude. I don't know how to thank you," she admitted, voice trembling, smiled, shrugging as though no thanks were necessary. "You don't need to," he said simply. "Just survive, that's enough." His words were humble, but they carried the weight of loyalty stronger than any promise. Looked at him and realized something extraordinary. In this human, she had found not only a friend but a companion who understood her pain without needing explanations, who offered courage without demanding repayment, who made her feel alive even in the depths of despair. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls around her heart began to crumble. She was no longer just a wounded princess hiding from the world. She was someone who mattered, someone who could hope, someone who could trust again. For the first time in days, allowed herself to rest without fear. The cold wind whispered past her broken wings, and instead of despair she felt something delicate, fragile but alive, trust. And with it came the faintest glimmer of hope. Perhaps she was not truly alone, perhaps she could face the darkness, and perhaps, just perhaps, this human could be the reason she survived, and had been traveling for days across the jagged moonscape, seeking shelter and safety. The fragile bond between them had grown stronger, a quiet trust forged from shared struggle. Yet even in this fragile calm, felt the pulse of fear in her veins. Her pursuers had not forgotten her. She could feel their presence lingering like a shadow across the craters, always just out of sight. The first warning came as a distant roar, a sound that made the rocks tremble beneath their feet. Froze, her wings twitching despite the pain, and her heart hammered violently. Noticed immediately. "They're close," he said, his voice calm, though his eyes sharpened with focus. Wanted to flee, to hide in the jagged cliffs, to leave everything behind. But for the first time, hesitation tugged at her differently, because she was not alone. As the shadows of the hunters grew nearer, positioned himself between and the threat. "We face them together," he said simply, his hand brushing against her shoulder in a reassuring gesture. Stared at him, incredulous. She had been running alone for so long, trusting no one, believing no one could stand by her without fear or greed. And yet here was a human, fragile, unarmed, entirely untrained in the ways of alien warfare, standing firm for her. The hunters appeared from the horizon, their dark armor gleaming under the faint light of the twin moons. Their eyes, cruel and cold, fixed on as if she were nothing more than prey. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to breathe, to remember presence beside her. His courage was simple, honest, and unlike anything she had ever seen. It reminded her that strength was not only measured in weapons or numbers, it could also exist in the heart. The first wave of hunters charged, leaped instinctively trying to evade, but her broken wings faltered, darted forward, throwing rocks and using debris to distract the attackers. It was reckless, terrifying, and impossibly brave. Watched him move with a mixture of awe and fear, her chest swelling with a strange emotion she could barely name. He was risking himself for her, a being so unlike her own people, so different in every way, and yet utterly loyal. With renewed determination, rose to meet the attack. Her alien reflexes, honed through years of training and survival, combined with a clever guidance. Together, they became an unlikely team, moving in ways neither had planned. She struck with precision, dodging blaster fire while used his ingenuity to manipulate the terrain, sending hunters tumbling into crevices. The odds were against them, yet for the first time in weeks, felt a spark of hope. Pain lanced through her wings as she fought, but she no longer thought only of survival. She thought of the trust between them, of the bond that had become stronger than fear itself. With each strike, each dodge, she realized something profound. Courage could be shared. Fear could be divided. And even a princess, wounded and betrayed, could fight alongside someone who believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. When the last hunter fell, dropped to her knees, gasping for breath, her wings trembling, stood beside her unscathed, though dirt and dust streaked his face. He offered a faint, tired smile. "We're not done," he said quietly, "but we survived." Looked at him, awe and gratitude washing over her. In the darkest moment of her life, when betrayal had left her broken and hopeless, this human had shown her what loyalty, bravery, and heart truly meant. For the first time in days, allowed herself to feel more than fear and pain. She felt connection. She felt hope. And most importantly, she felt that perhaps she was not entirely alone in the universe after all. The shadows of her past were still out there, but now, with by her side, she believed she could face them, whatever came next. The next morning, the pale light of the twin moons revealed the devastation around them. Craters, the landscape, and smoke from the last night's battle drifted across the horizon. His wings throbbed with pain, and every movement reminded her of how fragile her body had become. Yet she refused to lie down and surrender. With at her side, survival no longer felt like a lonely struggle, it felt possible. They moved cautiously across the rocky plains, but the hunters were relentless. Instincts warned her that another group was closing in, faster and more organized than the last. She tried to hide, blending with the shadows, but shook his head gently. "We face them," he said. His voice carried no fear, only resolve. For a brief, shocking moment, felt hope clash with panic. Could a human really stand against the ruthless hunters that had torn her world apart? The first attackers appeared suddenly, their dark armor glinting, weapons raised. His chest tightened. Pain shot through her wings as she tried to lift herself, but she faltered, acted instantly, picking up a jagged rock and throwing it to create a diversion. The hunters hesitated, and in that fraction of a second, lunged, striking with precision. Her alien reflexes, honed through years of palace training and survival, combined with a quick thinking, created an unpredictable force. They fought together like a strange, untrained team, ducked and rolled under the hunter's strikes, using rocks and debris as shields, whilst movements were swift, almost otherworldly despite her broken wings. She realized something astonishing: courage could be contagious. Fearlessness ignited something in her, something she had thought was lost. Pain and exhaustion still gnawed at her, but determination surged stronger than ever. A hunter lunged at from behind, and she barely twisted in time to avoid the blade. Saw the attack and shoved her out of the way, taking a glancing blow himself. Blood streaked his arm, but he smiled faintly at her, saying, "I've got you." The simplicity of those words struck her harder than any sword ever could. For the first time, she felt the depth of connection between them, not just trust, but loyalty, courage, and a shared will to survive. As the battle raged, began to move differently, more fluidly, more strategically. Guidance helped her anticipate attacks, and she instinctively adjusted her movements to protect him as well. Their coordination, born of necessity and mutual trust, became almost like a dance, wild, chaotic, dangerous, but effective. One by one, the hunters fell or fled, unable to predict the strange synergy between the alien princess and the human who refused to leave her side. When the last hunter collapsed, silence fell over the moon's barren surface. Sank to her knees, gasping, her wings trembling, stood beside her, bloodied but alive, offering a steady hand. "We made it," he said softly. The words felt like a lifeline. Looked at him, her chest heaving, and realized something extraordinary. They had survived not because of her strength alone or his, but because they had fought together. Their courage had become shared, their fear divided. For the first time since her betrayal, smiled. A small, fragile thing, but genuine. Met her gaze and returned it, and in that moment she understood something profound. Bravery was not a matter of species or size. Compassion was not limited to one world. And sometimes the smallest gestures, the human's patience, his presence, his refusal to abandon her, could be more powerful than the sharpest blade. Exhausted, battered, yet alive, allowed herself to rest against her broken wings, trembling. The universe still threatened her and dangers would come again. But she was no longer alone. And with that knowledge she felt something that had been absent for so long: hope. Hope that even in the darkest moments, courage, loyalty, and friendship could light a path forward. After the last hunters had fled and began their journey across the barren moonscape, moving slowly and carefully. Wings ached with every step but stayed close, supporting her when she stumbled. The bond between them had grown stronger with every shared danger, every whispered word, every quiet moment of trust. She realized that for the first time in weeks, she felt something she had not dared to feel: hope. The moons were harsh and unforgiving, jagged rocks jutting from every surface, gusts of cold wind cutting across the desolate terrain. Yet, despite the danger, began to notice the small beauty of the world around her. Pale moss clung to rocks, faint streaks of luminescent crystals glowed in dark caves, and the distant horizon shimmered in colors she had never seen in the palace gardens of her youth. Pointed these things out to her, sometimes with words, sometimes with gestures, and each observation made her smile quietly. It was strange, she thought, how someone so simple could teach her to see wonder again. During their journey began to share more of herself with. She spoke of the palace she had lost, of the people who had betrayed her, and of the heavy weight of responsibility she had carried since she was young. Her voice often trembled but never interrupted. He listened with patience, absorbing her stories without judgment. When she faltered, he offered encouragement, not commands, not solutions, only quiet, steady support. And realized that this human strength lay not in weapons or cunning, but in his heart. One night they sheltered in a small cave, the twin moons casting a soft glow across the jagged floor. Lay on the rocky ground, exhausted and in pain, while built a small fire. The warmth eased her aching body, and she watched him work with a calm efficiency that made her admire him even more. "Your world, your people," she said softly, "are very different from mine." Looked up, smiling faintly. "Different, yes, but maybe courage is the same everywhere." His words were simple, yet they resonated deeply within her. As they traveled, saw more of world through his eyes. He told her of oceans, forests, and mountains filled with creatures both strange and beautiful. He spoke of humans who laughed, cried, and held each other close, even when survival was uncertain. Listened, fascinated, realizing that bravery and compassion were not limited to her people or her galaxy. They were universal. Unwavering hope and quiet courage ignited a fire within her own heart, reminding her that survival was not just about strength, but about trust, loyalty, and connection. One afternoon, stumbled near a cliff's edge, pain lancing through her wings, caught her instantly, holding her steady. "I won't let you fall," he said, his eyes fierce with determination. The simplicity of his promise, the raw honesty in his gaze, brought tears to her eyes. She realized then that she had begun to rely on him, not just for protection but for strength, for hope, and for the courage to keep going. For the first time, she believed in someone outside herself. As the days passed, their journey became more than survival. It became a shared path of trust and understanding. Found herself laughing at odd human habits, marveling at his clever ways to solve problems and finding comfort in his quiet presence. And in turn, saw the depth of her resilience, her intelligence, and her indomitable spirit. Together, they navigated the harsh moonscape, each learning from the other, each inspiring the other to face what lay ahead. For the journey was transformative. She realized that hope and courage could come from the most unexpected places, that trust could be built even after betrayal, and that even a princess with broken wings could find strength in companionship. And for she became more than a wounded alien. She became a partner, a friend, a symbol of resilience that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. By the time they reached the edge of a distant crater, no longer felt the crushing loneliness that had plagued her since her fall. She glanced at gratitude and awe in her eyes. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she admitted softly, smiled, brushing a streak of dust from her face. "You're not alone," he said, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, truly believed it, at last, and reached the edge of a hidden human settlement nestled among rocky asteroid rings. The structures were small but strong, built to survive the harsh moonscape. His heart pounded as she approached, uncertain of what awaited her. Her past had taught her that strangers could be enemies, that kindness could mask betrayal. But the steady presence at her side gave her courage. She realized she no longer faced the world alone. The humans who greeted them were cautious, wary of the alien before them. His wings, battered and broken, made her look vulnerable, even terrifying, but stepped forward, introducing her with calm certainty. "She is a friend. She has survived what many could not. She needs our help." His words were simple, yet they carried authority through their honesty. His heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time, she felt someone not only believed in her, but also defended her without fear. As the humans began to offer aid, allowed herself to let go of her guarded stance. They brought food, tended to her wings, and offered shelter. It was a strange sensation to be cared for without suspicion or expectation. She had expected rejection, isolation, or even hostility, but here, in this quiet corner of the galaxy, she found acceptance. Watched her quietly, his eyes reflecting relief and pride. He had shown her that courage and compassion could exist even in worlds so far apart. Spent her first night in the human settlement gazing at the stars. The twin moons of her home were far above, but for the first time she did not feel lost without them. She thought of the battles, the betrayals, and the endless fear she had endured, and she thought of whose courage had been simple, quiet, and unwavering. It had saved her, not just from her enemies, but from despair. It had reminded her that even the smallest gestures of loyalty could rebuild hope. Over the next days began to walk among the humans, learning their ways and slowly sharing her own stories. She discovered that bravery was universal. Their laughter, their concern for one another, their willingness to protect those in need. It reminded her of the ideals her own people once held, long before betrayal had torn them apart. She realized that compassion, trust, and courage were not limited by species or worlds. They were universal, uniting those who dared to believe in each other. One evening found her watching the stars again. "You've come a long way," he said softly, turned to him, her wings still broken but her spirit unbroken. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she admitted. "I never thought I could trust anyone outside of my world," smiled, brushing dust from her shoulder. "Trust isn't about species," he said. "It's about heart, and you've got a strong one." Felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not pain. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future beyond betrayal, beyond loneliness. She realized that courage could come from the most unexpected places, that human kindness could bridge galaxies, and that hope could survive even in the darkest moments. Had been that hope, and through him, she had learned to survive, to trust, and to dream again. When finally stood at the settlement's edge, looking at the humans who had welcomed her, she felt a profound sense of belonging. She was still a princess, still alien to this world, but she no longer felt powerless or alone. She had allies now. She had friendship. She had courage mirrored in another being who had refused to abandon her. In that moment, understood something simple and eternal. Even in a vast, dangerous universe, kindness and bravery could illuminate the darkest corners, and one soul's courage could change another's life forever. Turning to, whispered, "You saved me, not just my life but my hope," smiled, the warmth of humanity shining in his eyes. "You never needed saving," he said. "You just needed someone to believe in you." And as the twin moons rose high above the settlement, knew that she had found more than safety. She had found trust, hope, and a reminder that even the most broken hearts could heal when someone dared to stand beside them.